Good evening, everyone. A warm welcome. My name is Adam Hems, and I'm the leader of the Houston Azure Group. Have been since 2016 now. My co-leader, Kim Vardy, is in the room as well. Welcome to everyone. How many noobs do we have? I know I've met some of the noobs. Yeah, a few newbies. Yeah, a warm welcome to the noobs. What this group is about really is my day job is as a cloud architect at Microsoft. So I spend all day talking to Microsoft customers about Azure, and I like it. A lot of fun. It's great. But one thing that is just not possible as part of that is the ability for users, customers of the Azure cloud to learn from the experiences of one another, right? NDAs, things like that, not a way for a community. So this is all about community. It is the focus of this, of meeting other people who like-minded, who also want to learn, because the journeys are very similar. The technology is the same for everyone, of course. There's one set, there's a lot of it. And the journeys too are very similar. But of course, the use cases are very different of healthcare and oil and gas, and there's all kinds of here in Houston different problems that businesses are looking to solve, large and small. So lots of opportunities to learn from one another. Before I get to our speaker, one thing that's been fun previously is if everyone can just say a little bit about themselves for the benefit of others. It is a community. I'll start with you. Yes.
My name is Tethr. I work in Amazon as a developer.
Yes, welcome back. And go ahead. Oh, brand new. Yeah.
And
Oh, okay, SE 104. So security, the all up one. Okay. Okay. Welcome, Natalie. Kate. Mary. Sorry. Excuse me. Yes.
Ray, I'm retired from 50 years of software development, mostly in structural engineering design.
And bug free every line, right?
Some bugs we put in on purpose.
Yeah, I think there are some other developers. Kevin's a developer, right? Yeah. So you're not alone. We're not us developers. Just right, Tony.
So my name's Tony. I'm a software engineer and the software engineering capability lead for BGS here.
Welcome back, Tony. Kevin, noob, welcome.
Engineer at Frostbank, and I'm here to meet people, learn more about containers, and just try to get involved with the community.
Yeah, there's actually quite a few financial FinServ. There's actually a lot of financial services companies in Houston, so not alone. It's being in the banking, healthcare, oil and gas, and actually state and local government. We have a bunch of areas. So anyway, so.
Hi, I'm John Fasciano here with Starvote here in Houston, Azure administrator, just here to network, meet people, learn more.
Oh, you're an Azure admin? Okay. Let's go ahead.
Hello, my name is Armando Huerta. I'm a software engineer and also in charge of the cloud implementation of Texas Teachers of Tomorrow.
Okay.
So,
all right.
Yeah, and I would like to be part of this community.
Okay. All right. Warm welcome and another software developer. Excellent. Wow. It's great. John, right? No. Charles, darn it.
hi, I'm Charlie. I work at an AI startup. Although most of my job is not even remotely related to AI, and I work mainly as a maintainer of sorts for the company's slowly aging ASP.NET based.
ASP.NET. Excellent. Slowly aging.
Slowly aging.
Excellent. So I mean, you're a developer, Charlie, or
Yes.
Okay, another one. Excellent. Well, I guess containers. Containers was going to attract a bunch of developers, I think. Yeah, I think so. All right. Welcome. These folks.
Hi, I'm Bishan. I'm a data/software engineer at SMB. And I've been to like a few of these so far, so. Yeah.
Welcome back.
Hi, guys. My name is Hermit. I do solution architecture at the company where Bijan works. And we work with some really strange technologies.
Okay.
We started our
.NET? No.
retired on
Oh, right. Okay.
years ago.
Okay, good. Good.
We started our Azure journey about a couple of years ago. So I'm here to contrast how we're doing it versus here.
You good?
Yes.
Okay, okay, good. Welcome. Liz, hello.
I'm a senior data analyst at PS's Industrial Group. I'm here to learn new technologies.
Liz is a regular, been coming for many years, right? Yeah. All right, did I miss anyone? There are some new folks come in. Yeah, no escape. Welcome, welcome. We're doing little intros for
I feel
everyone.
slighted, Adam.
Oh. Oh,
Hey, Adam. It's
oh,
me,
JD.
JD.
Greetings.
Yes,
Hello.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
We're
the-
still
the
going
man
around the room,
responsible-
JD. Give us a second. Give us
Okay.
a second. All right. So we had. Okay. Okay. Test ops.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Okay. Excellent. A warm welcome. And yeah, Andres, welcome back. Yes, doing quick intros.
Software developer.
Yes. Welcome back. Did I miss anyone else?
I just joined the meeting. Can you guys hear me?
Hang on a second. We're not going through the folks online just yet. Give us a second. We're
Oh.
still going through the folks in the room. Yeah,
I
I have the camera
apologize.
on, but I don't think it's working in the room. Yeah, give us a sec, folks in the room, online. Sorry, go ahead. Another developer. Excellent. All right. Okay. A warm welcome. Where are you a student at? Okay. Oh, great. Welcome. Right place. Here to learn. Yes. Ed?
In Kamath, I'm a architect at H&R Block.
I think that's everyone so far. All right. Okay. Okay. So now we have some folks online. Warm welcome. So, JD, go ahead, sir.
Oh, well, I didn't mean to go out of turn originally. I'm JD Morton. I'm a program manager / agile guy / developer. Most of my time and free time is spent doing Rust development right now and deploying stuff in Docker. So I'm quite interested to see the lessons that have been learned from today's presentation.
Hey, thanks for joining, JD. Good to see you again, man.
It is good to see you too, Adam. One of these days I'll get down there and say hi to you.
I'd like that. I'd like that. All right. John DeFries, greetings.
Greetings. I am here to learn, and next week I'm gonna schedule my first attempt at the AZ 104. I've been studying that pretty heavily, and I've been
Okay.
playing around with containers the last year or two, and real interested to see what you got going on today.
All right. Yeah, me too. Me too. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it as well. Welcome, John, and good luck next week. I don't think you'll need it as your administrator. You'll knock it out. It's easy peasy. Yeah, no problem.
Here's
It now has container apps in it, which I thought was a good thing. Yeah, they took out the AKS. There's not so much. Now it's container apps. So yeah, you'll knock it out of the park. All right. DW, greetings. You can come off mute if you want, DW. No? Okay. Jose, greetings.
Hello. Cheers from Houston as well. I'm sorry I couldn't make it in person. I had to join remotely. I work as a network operations analyst and also taking my AC 104 soon.
Okay.
Hopefully this month, within a couple of weeks.
Okay, good.
And I'm pretty excited of being here with you guys and gather some knowledge with you.
Yes. Yeah, you're in town, so yeah, we'd love to see you. Come down and see us sometime next time you get a chance.
Yeah.
I
I'm
hear,
sure I
I know
will.
how it is. That's why we also have it online, so you're good.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. Vivek.
Hello, everyone. This is Vivek here. I'm joining from Dallas, actually, Dallas, Texas.
From
And
Dallas.
thanks
Okay,
for,
that's just up the road. That's fine. Just
yeah,
neighbor.
yeah. So I am a DevOps engineer by profession, if that is a thing. And so I wanted to have an introduction to containers. This seemed like a nice one. So I'm here.
Okay. All right. Well, welcome. Thanks for joining us, neighbor. Zachary C.
Hello, I'm Zach Crabtree. Typically, I like to make it in person, but I was unfortunately not able to do so tonight. But I'm also from the Houston area. I'm a security analyst with a company called Insperity. And I even got some Papa John's on the way to make it the most authentic Azure Meetup experience, remote Azure Meetup experience possible. But I'm here just because I generally enjoy learning about Azure.
All right. Thanks for joining us, Zach. All right. Let's see. I'm going to. So for those folks in the room, oh yeah, sorry, Lance. Didn't mean to miss you. Go ahead, Lance. Go ahead. Learning from Pete. Yes, we all are. We all are. It's all hanging on Pete at this point. All right. Okay, so I have one piece of bureaucracy I want from everyone. You can all help me out by, see, I want this slide up. Okay, bust out a phone or whatever and just scan the code, please. This is how we got the pizza sponsorship from a development org at Microsoft. By clicking the barcode, so we're going to have there's a couple of links to the YouTube channel for the meetup where the recordings are going to be, so you can relive Pete's presentation here as much as you like, and also some the Learn documentation around AKS, because Pete can talk about that too. So yeah, please do us all a solid and help me out with just click the QR code. Just that's the ask. Everyone got it? All right. Okay. Yeah. You guys, around. You know how this works, right? I appreciate the help. All right. That was my only. That was that. All right. Without further ado, Pete, sir, you're up. Yep. So you just plug on in. Sec. Magic to happen. Think about it.
That's a good sign.
Turn your mic on.
Yes, sir.
You're on. You're on.
Testing.
Folks in the room, so all the mics are open. So have your quiet conversations in the back there. The mics can hear you. So that if you want a quiet conversation, best go outside. All right, just fair warning. Okay, that was.
All right. Excellent. This is an interactive presentation, and for the first bit of interaction, I'm going to ask someone online, just chat and say if my levels are too low or if you can hear me fine online. In person, I'm not worried about y'all in person. I don't care about y'all in person. Online only. So anyway, someone get back to me. I'll move it up if needed. Welcome, everybody. I am Peter. I am one of you. My title is Principal Cloud Architect. I have been in the industry for, it is 20 years now, but I am just one of you. We're all on a journey. We're learning. Yes. So I also, this is my info. Doesn't really matter. I think the most important thing for you to know is that the following presentation, I've uploaded the slides to the GitHub, the slides and notes. So I have notes that pretty much match the slides. It's not going to be an exciting presentation, but if you want to refer to something I've said, you can go to the GitHub and look at my presentation, Journey to Containers, and you will find the README has all of the notes that I'm about to go over. I'm pretty shameless. So Tony knows because he was here. Anyway, I have two goals today. One is to start a discussion, so I'm really interested. Honestly, if y'all interject, I would love to hear it. But I would love to hear about other people's journeys. The other goal is because this is recorded, I'm going to try and not give away the farm about my company. So, we'll be a little bit circumspect. Anyway, welcome everybody. Does everyone know what this is?
Triangle.
It is a triangle. Thank you. Okay, this is the
Hierarchy of needs.
Wikipedia hierarchy of needs. I heard it, right?
Wonderful hierarchy.
Okay, so
Yeah.
I'm not saying I totally buy into this, but let me just explain why I'm showing you the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Because we work in operations, and there is a very strict hierarchy of needs. Now, at the top of the hierarchy, I call this the Google SRE book. That's at the very top where they say only 50% of your effort should be wasted on toil. And they define toil specifically, and they have time to write a book and market it. So that's what we call the top. And at the very bottom is where you go out of business because you're having so much downtime you lose customer trust. So we're all somewhere in between, where this is where it gets to where I'm pretty shameless, and I'm not going to try and give away too much. So there's a balance here. But all of us are somewhere in between, where we have major real problems at work, but we are solving them. And maybe at times we have time to climb the ladder and maybe improve our automation. And maybe at times we get such a flood of new customers and whatever. For whatever reason, I was talking earlier today about, we were automating new user setups, and I got 60 of them in one day. And you know what motivates you to automate will be about 60 new users in one day. Anyway, so do y'all understand why I'm sharing this? We, as a company, sit somewhere in the middle. Y'all, even though you won't admit it to me, are also somewhere in the middle of this hierarchy. Where is anyone willing to say where was the best place they've ever worked as far as like tackling really high level aspirational things? What was the most aspirational thing y'all did in the last year? Ooh. Tough one. All right. I'm just going to let the silence hang, except I'm not. We're going to keep moving. All right. So I work for a small enterprise SaaS, originally based in Austin. It is now fully remote. Thanks to COVID, we had an office in Austin. I was very excited to say it was the former Google office, except that it was in the north part of it. It was Google's office before they got a real office. We did find one fireman vest that said Google on it. That was the only way we knew it was Google's office.
Fireman's vest?
Those like fluorescent vests that it was the fire marshal's vest. So they left the fire marshal's vest and it said Google. I wish I still had that. I would wear it today. So anyway, we are a small engineering team. Cloud, along with my coworker, are pretty much running everything. We have the Azure accounts, we have a break glass account, all that good stuff, but we run all of it. If you need something, we run it. What that primarily means is that we run a lot of instances. I won't say how many. This is being recorded. We run a lot of instances of a bunch of websites and a lot of background processing. And we are multi-region for data sovereignty reasons. So we have things in the US and elsewhere. Okay. Diagram on the left, Netflix. Are you aware of what this diagram on the left means? Okay. This is what it looks like at a massive software organization. And I don't know why Netflix has a massive software organization, because they are delivering video on the internet, but who's to say? They're billions. They're a $1 billion company. The point is that crazy diagram on the left, which might be even fuzzier in how you're seeing it, each point is a service that was developed by Netflix. This is their microservices diagram. Each blue line, it's hard to tell they're lines, but those are lines, is a communication between Netflix's microservices. So what I'm saying is they run a lot of stuff. So when they give advice and you read their advice on a blog post on the internet, realize where they're coming from. If they can save 1% of their software development effort, they are saving millions of dollars. If they can save 1% of their budget of their costs, they are saving millions of dollars. So this is us on the right. I'm trying to be vague, but we have our massive monolith, which is a single dot in this diagram, but it basically means monolithic code base fronted by a bunch of different websites and also running a bunch of background jobs. So we primarily work off of message queues, which makes splitting up our monolith very nice. But the code base is one massive monolith. So we run one massive things hundreds of times, and then we run a few other things, which I'm also responsible for. So I work for Tethr. We are not the crypto Tethr, but we're named Tethr with a R, and we do call center analytics. And it's interestingly, I'm not a salesman, so I'm going to give you the worst pitch in the world, but I will say it is actionable insights, useful data extracted from calls that are going through a call center. And we also do chats and emails. Useful. I think what's fun is I was here a few months ago and we did the Microsoft AI demo. Every large language model demo, because I've seen an Amazon demo as well. Every LLM demo is call center analytics, and it brings joy to my heart. I just want to say, so if you want to see what our product does, go watch the Microsoft LLM demo. Anyway, or my Amazon one, I saw it there too. Okay. Any questions so far? We're going to start. We're going to talk through this story. Okay. So we are responsible for everything. We are a small team. We are a growing company, but scaling is not our immediate concern. Thanks mostly to Azure, by the way. If we had to run on physical infrastructure, I would spend all of my time scaling. So I just want to say thank you to Microsoft Azure for selling a product which lets me press a button and pay for another database. I really don't complain. If someone asked me earlier, what am I happiest with in Azure? And I said AKS, but I will say the other thing I'm really happy with is every single data storage service. So storage accounts, yes, perfect. Cosmos DB, a little bit expensive, but perfect. We have not had complaints with it. From what we use of Azure Service Bus, almost perfect. So everything that stores data, I'm so happy with. And I will say I get to contrast it because we self-host some things and it's less fun. All right, so we are a tiny team. We are not concerned too much about scaling. We do care about managing costs because we are running the flagship SaaS, and turns out aside from paying out money every month, we also measure cost of goods as a metric for the health of the company. So if you if your profit margin isn't good on your cost of goods, it turns out you're not, anyway, it's bad news, y'all, if you're a SaaS. Okay, so we are running on cloud services and Service Fabric. All right, question for anyone. Who is still running cloud services? I'm going to take a drink of water. Cloud services, still running it. Are you running classic or did you upgrade to the ARM version? I'm sorry, what? You got the extended? All right, let me ask you a question since this is a free consulting session. I looked into it. Do you have to deploy a new Azure resource every time you update the code? Okay, maybe we'll talk after. Doesn't matter though. I don't want to know the answer anymore. So we have one person using cloud services. Does anyone know what cloud services is? Besides, don't answer. You're done. All right, cloud services is one of the original, what they call classic Azure services. And it was, I'm bad at describing things, Adam. You're just gonna have to look at it. You're just gonna have to bear what my explanation is. It is a Windows-based, is it platform as a service? Anyway, you can run stuff. You run stuff and it secretly runs on Windows VMs. And for the most part, you never know anything except that they're slow, inefficient, and they are now, as of 2023, just months away from being deprecated. Although you can go to extended support, which we can talk about.
The original VMs, but IS.
Yes, okay. And honestly, I will say good things about this in a second, because you know what? We got very far. We were doing auto scaling on cloud services and it worked. And you know what? You can't get auto scaling that lets you sleep at night easily. And we had it. And I'm still thankful to cloud services for that.
2011
It was
where it was at back then.
it what? It was the first, and it is similar to app services. We'll talk about that as well. Okay. Reminds me, by the way, I don't have my clock out. When did I start? Let's just say at 6. 6:15. Okay. So that's cloud services. So it is deprecated technology. It is the year 2023. It is almost the year 2024. Do not deploy to cloud services. Y'all got that? That's your first. Just write it down. Do not deploy to cloud services. Microsoft tells you not to deploy to it anymore. It worked great. It was the first, special place in our heart. Don't use it anymore. Okay, second thing, Service Fabric. Now this, I have a personal vendetta against it because there was some pretty angry downtime that I had. But Service Fabric, you can read my slides. It is an effective way to orchestrate workloads. It also runs on Windows. They even run containers now, but they pretty much don't advertise Service Fabric anymore. If you go to, well, whatever, it still works. If you're there, you're fine. I think Kubernetes is superior in every way. I did not enjoy the problems we had with Service Fabric, and we are a tiny team, and I am terrible at my job.
Yeah, Service Fabric was the original container orchestrator. Predates Kubernetes.
I will also say we even made use of the actor framework in there. It even has an actor framework. And you're like, what's an actor framework? Don't worry about it. But if you need it, Service Fabric had it. And I don't know. I have angrier things to say about Service Fabric, but let's move on. Anyone using Service Fabric and have good stories? Good things that you got value out of Service Fabric. Okay, yeah.
Or to contain
many applications. So you deployed many things and you were able to run just a limited number of servers, and you were able to deploy a lot of different apps to it, right?
We have distributed across the world.
Okay, distributed. Okay, so that I do want to be nice. I do think none of us are going to start with Service Fabric today. Write that down as well. Don't start with Service Fabric today unless you need the actor framework, I guess, but I still don't recommend it. All right, that's a long takeaway, but go ahead and write that down. So that's where we were in 2020. We were running on cloud services. They had set it up originally back when it was, I hope, not a new service. I don't know how long ago that was, but we were doing pretty well. Some of our it was scaling. It did good work for us. We tried to move to Service Fabric and decided against it. This is one of those things where you talk about architectural decisions being made. And anyway, we decided not to go with Service Fabric somewhere around 2020. Okay, so a lot of us are developers here. Am I hearing that right? A lot of us are developers.
Hands up if you're a developer.
Okay, I'm seeing about, okay, half, 2/3. Okay. You also have to say, all right, who's present in the room right now? Can you raise your hand? You're present in the room. See, the same number of people raise their hand. You see that you get your baseline. You get your baseline by asking who is in the room, and you get them to raise their hand, and then only half of them do, and you go, okay, that's my baseline. I'm going to say we're mostly developers. See, you're learning. We're all learning things. Excellent. So every developer should at least look into using Docker for running their data stores and databases and message queues and all their vendor apps. So my last job, what we did was I had a 400-line PowerShell script or whatever it was, and it spun up SQL Server and RabbitMQ and Elasticsearch, and I think there were a few other things that were in there that it was spinning up, and it did it all on their local machine. And then we had Mac users, and I have a whole rant against Mac users on a .NET team. But in summary, and then we got redux of that, by the way, when they switched to ARM chips, and they're like, why doesn't something work? You're like, you're running an ARM PC. You get out. Yes. And the SQL that runs in a Docker container is slightly different. In fact, funny enough about the ARM thing, there's a SQL Edge, which is slightly different from Microsoft SQL Server. Azure SQL, it was compatible enough. We actually have one of our apps at the current place. Azure SQL is compatible enough that everything that works in the container will work in Azure. The other way, how do I say this carefully? Azure SQL is a subset of SQL Server. Does that make sense? At least for our needs. It worked perfect for me. Worked perfect for me. So anyway, if you're running Postgres, whatever, just run it in a container. RabbitMQ. I'm a big RabbitMQ fan. All right, how many of y'all use RabbitMQ or have used RabbitMQ in the past? Yes, 1, 2. All right, I'm doubling that number. So we have 4 people running Rabbit. It's a great product. Anyway, so what I'm saying is, all right, if nothing else, you're a developer, you're showing up to this talk, you're not sure you're going to run in Azure or do anything different. I will say very clearly investigate, especially if you're a team of more than one person, getting a Docker Compose set up so that you can run your stuff locally. That's all I'm saying. Locally, do your local development. And I'm not saying to containerize your app yet. I'm saying just like get your SQL, your Postgres, your message queues, get them all running locally in Docker. This will teach you how to use Docker. Or, for your lazy teammates who are lazy, you can tell them install, this software, and I will have a script that works even on a Mac, even on an M1 Mac. Yeah. Yeah. Locally, yes. I don't care, honestly. I mean, that's the truth. I think it will run equally efficiently. You can allocate a certain number of cores to your Docker environment, and it will use perfectly those cores. So it is perfect. I mean, it'll be the same. And if you need that little bit of boost, like we're the Azure user group, I actually recommend setting up an Azure database and just run locally, just talk directly to the cloud, whatever. Yeah, and by the way, I highly recommend against running databases in a container in the cloud. I'm not highly recommending it against it, but I will say part of the joy of containers going forward is that you can move them. They are portable containers. And what will cause you problems is if, for example, you're in a database cluster and you would like to move that database cluster, it becomes very difficult. It is so, what I'm saying is, I mean, it's difficult no matter what. How many container what? That's up to your app. That has nothing to do with containers. So what we have multiple talking to the same data stores. So we have things talking to Cosmos, things talking to Azure Storage, things talking to the same RabbitMQ. They're all talking to the same, yeah. Yeah. Okay, so Docker Compose for local development. Just try it out if you haven't done it. Okay, the next thing we did is we were Kubernetes noobs. So we set up an entire Kubernetes cluster inefficiently so that we could do our voice transcription stuff. And they had a Docker container and they shipped it to us. I still don't know what's in there. And I ran it and pointed stuff to a URL and it worked great. And then I looked at the auto scaling stuff and we had set it up completely wrong. And hilarious story. We were on CPU at the time. This was still in sandbox. We didn't do this in production, y'all. Okay. But we set up what they call CPU scaling. And it's a very simple rule. It says if my CPU is maxed out or is high usage for 10 seconds, if I measure it at the 10-second mark and it's high usage, scale up. And what would happen was the app itself, the Docker container, would take full CPU for several seconds while it started up. So the fun thing is we would transcribe one small file and it would be like a hello there, it would be something like that. And then the CPU would spike to 100%. It would set up a second one. The second one would spike to 100% because it's still starting. It would scale up again. Guess what? We maxed out our scaling every time we transcribed. It was hilarious. We laugh and laugh and laugh. Don't worry, we fixed it. GPU is much more efficient at this stuff, by the way. No, it was Kubernetes. We set up a whole Kubernetes thing, AKS. We set up AKS. There is, by the way, in case you need CUDA drivers, there is a very good page on the Azure website about how to set up the CUDA drivers for your AKS cluster. It's perfect. No. We set up AKS cluster and we would transcribe stuff in the cloud. Azure AKS.
Which is an open source container orchestrator installed and configured on a bunch of VMs.
Okay, so we got a little bit of Kubernetes experience, still horrible noobs, but we got through our sandbox phase. We got into production. By the time we got into production, we were able to support it without it falling over or costing $1 million. Okay. The next thing we did was we converted .NET framework monolith. Okay, here's the next question for the crowd. How many of you need to upgrade a .NET framework application? And some of y'all have no .NET at all. I would actually like to hear y'all's story, but y'all are next. Okay, tell me. Well, let's talk about that because honestly, this journey to containers for .NET developers, and my last was at the North Houston .NET user group. So it was very targeted to .NET developers, but it would the majority of the effort, and I mean the strong majority of the effort, was getting us to .NET Core. So what was your effort? What was the hardest thing? What was the easiest thing? Oh. All right. Is anyone still running .NET Framework? Okay. All right. Go ahead.
Yeah.
You want to hear? We honestly, if I finish early, we can just talk about upgrading .NET for the rest of the time because it is that everyone needs to do it. It feels like everyone. And again, half of you, I'm just multiplying by 2. Half of you responded, so I multiplied by 2. So it's everyone in the room has .NET Framework upgrade. What's up?
I wasn't afraid when we had to migrate from .NET Framework to .NET Core.
Yeah. 1 year. Did y'all do it in parts? Did you rewrite or did you just upgrade in place? In parts. I will ask questions. In fact, let's see, do I have tips? Okay, so let's just start here and then we'll go backwards. .NET. So did y'all do these steps separately? How did y'all separate it out? This is very .NET specific. By the way, I do have notes on my GitHub, so it's fine. Huh? Look, just the slides need updating. I wanted to say .NET 7 because it was the least confusing way to say .NET Core. Because if I say .NET Core, they're thinking .NET Core, the old stuff? And then I say to .NET, and then they say, what do you mean .NET? And so I wrote .NET 7. So it's already been confusing, so that was a complete failure. One of many. Okay, so these are separate steps you can do. Make a commit, test it, deploy it. Every single one of these migration steps can be done separately. And I will say, if you're sitting in a .NET Framework app, if you have no intention of upgrading it, I would still recommend doing the first step, which is migrating your NuGet packages. Because the old style of NuGet packages has, how do I say this very carefully, explicit dependencies. And that stupid thing called assembly binding redirects. This, if you can get your NuGet package references to these new package reference style, you can probably do away with all your assembly binding redirects. And I say probably because I haven't seen everyone's code base, and there's a reason they're there. But you can get away. You can do this. I believe in you. All right. So anyway, this is a very specific checklist of how to get your stuff. Small changes. And by the way, when I say small, and if you have 100 C# project files, the first step is about 100 files of unreadable XML changes. But good luck to you. What else do we have? So the last thing I'll say is, has anyone had to upgrade an ASP.NET MVC or web forms project? Everyone has it. Everyone has it. So MVC or web forms is pretty much impossible to convert. You're going to have to rewrite the pages.
Wait, right, hold on.
You had to rewrite the web forms? Yeah. Okay. That's what has to happen.
No, they're not. But it takes time.
Dramatic rewrite. That's a new one. Make a note of that. Dramatic rewrite.
I will say for us, the majority of the effort, well, I mean, I would say the first steps were about half of it. And then the last, our flagship ASP.NET website, which was MVC, by the way, was the other half. Web forms is going to be worse. Sorry. It'll be worse. All right. Question about y'all. How did y'all migrate? What did y'all migrate to? And yeah, if you did a rewrite, if it didn't go to .NET, then y'all just rewrote, right?
Well, for the reason I was raising my hand earlier was because like at a previous employer that I worked for 5 years, we had everything in full .NET, WCF and web forms, and like we weren't able to really upgrade anything. I mean, I don't think we had the knowledge of contained within this slide to know how to even begin the process. So as far as I know, they're still running .NET full and they've never upgraded any component. So I find it amazing that someone's able to upgrade to.
We were motivated by our cost of goods. But I will say for a lot of people, if it's internal business apps,
yeah,
.NET Framework is still supported.
Works on Windows containers.
Yeah. Well, but your ASP web forms, yeah? No. We migrated. Hey, we're living in the future. Y'all are in the past.
Thank you, Pete.
You know, for a demo app, maybe a few hours. But I will also say, by the way, since we did our migration, there are tools. Interestingly, Amazon released a tool for upgrading .NET Framework to .NET Core. They did it first, and then Microsoft released a tool. I have not used either of them, but they exist, and you should definitely try it out because maybe they'll do this first step automatically. I will also say, since we're yeah, I don't want to talk about WCF, but I will say third tool, and I am a world expert at this tool. JetBrains has a tool, either ReSharper or Rider. They have a refactor that says remove unused dependencies. And it will either work for you and save you multiple days of effort, or it won't work. I highly recommend, before you embark on step one, that you utilize JetBrains ReSharper's remove unused packages. So there you go. The .NET Core is the perfect modern motto. How about that? You like that answer? It is the future. Once you're targeting .NET Core or .NET 8 or 7, which is still good for a year, but go ahead and target 8. Once you target .NET 8, you can run on containers, Linux, Mac, or Windows, and even Mac ARM for those crazy people who demand the best MacBook, despite it being incompatible with all of their software. You know what? That's a note that we do not take advantage of, but we should look into once our compute costs grow high enough. We'll talk about that.
Lot of companies.
Yeah, Golang, it's statically compiled. They have an ORM if you want to touch a SQL database. It's got a good ecosystem. Hey, this is the Azure user group. So I will say a nice thing about .NET, which is I honestly don't think any of the performance differences, because Golang makes a tiny exe or whatever, binary. Hey, we're not using Windows terms anymore. It's a binary, right? A real Linux user. Okay. I just don't think performance matters. All right. One of the most influential things that I've ever seen on my whole career was because I work on business apps that deal with data over a network. There's a bunch of different ways to visualize the data, but they'll talk about, level 1 cache, a CPU instruction, accessing RAM, accessing disk, and they used to use the old hard drives instead of the new SSDs. Then they'll say going over a network, and then, go. And what inevitably happens is going over a network is 10, 20 milliseconds, whatever it is, and that blows away all of your performance gain. So depending on what you're doing, we have a few places where CPU intensive stuff happens, but for the most part, my generic advice for data-driven apps is focus on your database and your interactions with the database. If you're using an ORM, you're already losing this war anyway. That's a spicy. Sorry, that was too spicy, but so be it. All right. Does anyone? I should talk about how we migrated. We migrated our stuff. We have a lot of background services. They call it Strangler Fig pattern, which I learned the last time I presented this, and they were like, "That's a," and they told me the name of it. So I'm going to repeat it to you like I'm the expert. But in summary, what we did was we slowly strangled out the old services. We had cloud services running a bunch of stuff, Service Fabric running a bunch of stuff. We slowly, using feature flags, turned off services here and spun them up in Kubernetes. And eventually we had nothing left in Service Fabric. We destroyed it. And then the same thing with cloud services. We moved the website, strangled it out, but then we made it where we could deploy it back if something went wrong, and many things went wrong, by the way. Many things. Don't worry about it. But this is the strangler pattern. This is what you do. You stand up a copy of the thing and then slowly destroy the old thing or strangle it out. It's pretty vivid image there. It's a strangler fig. It's nature. Can't be done. Now we live in Kubernetes. So we happen to move into Kubernetes, AKS specifically. There's an Azure service called AKS. It is their Kubernetes distro. You're not responsible for all of Kubernetes. I've been told it is very difficult to run Kubernetes yourself. That's what I've been told. I have no idea. I wouldn't know. And I've been told the generic advice is if you're running on-prem and you need Kubernetes, you pay a vendor. I think Adam mentioned OpenShift. I think VMware has their own distro. And what was the other one? I feel like Canonical runs one. Anyway, there's some on-prem distros. You can try and be the open source genius, but it's really hard. And once you're troubleshooting it, I think you can get it stood up. This is the problem with everything operations. If you're responsible, if you're running your own data center, like how are you going to run Kubernetes? I don't know. The great answer is I don't know. That's a serious answer, and I don't want to know. It's like a whole job title, and I don't want to know. If there's a job opening and it says on-prem Kubernetes, I'm out. Troubleshooting, like part of the joy of being in Azure is at some point, assuming I didn't do anything wrong, there will be an Azure status page telling me that it will be fixed. Yeah.
I heard from you that
Much smaller. Yes, you can focus on what you're doing instead of. So you still have to understand what a pod is. You could deploy your deployments and then set up a service and then set up an ingress, which is, by the way, deprecated, which will be a future slide about how everything gets deprecated within like 2 seconds. Anyway, you still have to learn that part of it, but you don't have to understand what the etcd server is doing, for example. You're like, what's etcd? You don't want to know, and you don't have to as long as you're not doing anything crazy, but you will find out. The API server, you don't run it in AKS. Yes, and I will just give you a quick, I'm not going to demo it because it's my work computer, but kube control, which is the command line, it's okay. It's kind of like telling people to use the Docker command line. So if anyone has ever told you to use the Docker command line raw, they don't have your best interests at heart. And you need to find a UI of some kind. Okay? So the same with the Kubernetes control, kube control. You can run it. It's good for scripts. It's okay. It's good that you learn the fundamentals. But I will tell you a better way to learn the fundamentals is, sorry, I'm hiccuping, is to either use OpenLens, which is a free like GUI that just has a list of resources. So you walk into Kubernetes and you say, what is a pod? I didn't know they existed 2 seconds ago, but I have a thing called a pod now. Or you install Cert Manager and it installs about 7 custom resources and you say, I don't know what any of these are either. Anyway, my point is you install either OpenLens or a tool called K9s. Canines. It's kind of fun. It sounds like a dog. Canines. I highly recommend K9s as as I use it. It is, in my opinion, the most loved tool I have used in the last decade. I can't remember one that I think has been invested in more with love. Everything I want is in K9. So if you're doing Kubernetes locally, doesn't matter. Install K9s, it's perfect. Any questions about connecting to Kubernetes? K9s is just a front end, a UI of sorts to show you what is in your Kubernetes cluster or multiple clusters. So you want to, you follow the tutorial, you install the Hello World app. You could use K9s to go look at your pods, your deployments, your services, your endpoints, your replica sets, your ingress. Yeah. I do. And there's a read-only mode if you're afraid of modifying production on accident. So I highly recommend you look into that if you're connected to a production cluster. Okay, so that was a lot of Kubernetes specific stuff. Here's my question for the audience. I've heard nothing from anyone online. So far, this is for you. Why do we move to containers? Why containers?
I think
Right,
one
go.
of the reasons would be to, make it easier to upgrade apps, whatever is in.
You said easier to move the app? That's what I heard?
Yeah, easier to upgrade the app, like the version.
Upgrade. Deployments are very easy. It depends on where you're hosting. I totally agree. Any other reason? Thank you.
Better application density.
Better application density. I will say again for the record, Service Fabric does the exact same thing. And they also let you host containers for the record. Hey, I'm being fair. I'm being as fair as I can be. There are other services that let you do application density, but I do believe Kubernetes is a good model for application density. I will also say for most of us, I don't know where we work. I don't know how many things we manage, but it's too many. So if someone says, I want to host an app, my primary concern is honestly not application density unless we are sending it to our flagship SaaS app. If it's an internal app, send them to app services. I don't care. It doesn't, like, cost doesn't matter. Did I say that aloud? This is being recorded. But it is true. Application density matters at a certain scale. So I just want to cut that off though, because I don't like, I'm sorry, I'm being a hater, but application density matters at a certain scale, but it definitely doesn't matter if you're just hosting a website in 2 cores with some background jobs on it, you know? Okay, any other reasons?
The classic reason is that you can make sure that everything your application needs is there in one place.
Build dependencies are perfect. And this is a good point. For .NET, we kind of were spoiled on Windows because we would just install the .NET framework, and as long as the correct framework was installed, we could run our app. And there were even self-contained apps that were massive that you could do that as well. So we're kind of spoiled, but that's a perfect thing that is very important with other tool chains. To spin them up, I will say compared to Windows, an entire Windows server, it is definitely true. Honestly, I've not evaluated many other options. So like if there's like a VMware option that would spin up a Linux VM not in a container, maybe that would be efficient too. It's just a few seconds more maybe, but that's totally true. So what I want to get at here is that yes, there are many reasons to do containers. And I want to reemphasize, we could have made cloud services work for us going forward. We could have done it. We could have made Service Fabric work, although I would have died by now. You know, I'm a hater, but I had some bad experiences. But it honestly is a good product too. It runs on Windows. It does. They're patching it all the time. I see the change logs. It is open source now. Okay, so you if you're growing massive scale, in theory, you don't have vendor lock-in, so that's a big deal too. So containers, I will just give, I don't have my notes with me, so let's see if I can do it. Containers are a portable way to deploy your apps. They are portable. So one thing I really don't like is signing long leases. And something about containers, if I deploy a container, I feel like I'm signing a short-term lease. This is a part of who I am. This is not good cloud architecture. This is just who I am. So I feel like you can escape any situation in a container as long as you're running a stateless service. There's a very specific definition for stateless service. But in summary, as long as you're not running, let's say, connecting to a data store, as long as your container can be interchanged or multiple of them run at the same time, I would just vaguely say that's a stateless. There's a much better explanation. Go watch the YouTube video. I probably should have prepped a definition of a stateless service, but there's a very specific definition of a stateless service. As long as you're in a stateless service in a container, you can move to anywhere. You can go from Azure to on-prem. We're not going to do it, by the way. We love Azure too much. Okay, but you can go on-prem. You can go from AKS to container apps. You can go from one AKS, which again is Azure Kubernetes service. The thing we're running, we can go from one AKS cluster where we made a mistake when we set it up. We can move it to another AKS cluster. And you know what? That's a very common scenario. We haven't done it yet, but no, actually we did do it that one time. Okay, so that is why containers. I'm still talking about us. We had major cost savings. So this is the benefits that we moved. We moved the needle. Compute costs used to be a significant part of our cloud budget. And I say used to. So they still are a part. But moving from cloud services, scaling Windows slowly, let us save a ton of money just by switching from Windows to Linux. That was a massive savings. Then we got even better savings switching to Spot VMs. So how many of y'all have ever used Spot VMs, Amazon or Microsoft?
Spot VMs. That's a good question.
Well, okay, so no one raised their hands. So that means 0 to 1 person uses it. Spot VMs. It is in the Azure ecosystem. We'll just talk about Azure's spot pricing that we use. Anyway, the Spot VM is a VM in every way. Azure is not required to give it to you. And Azure will give you a 30-second notice that it is going to take away a Spot VM. So if you have garbage workloads that don't need immediate, like don't run your websites on this. That's the first step. Don't run your websites on a Spot VM. Yeah, you can run a, and well, the point is you better have different SKUs for Spot VMs. So this is the whole deal. When does Azure take away a Spot VM? We've learned, Adam.
That's correct.
No, they don't.
Is it anytime?
Well, I'm just saying it's less frequent. Honestly, our Spot VMs that we use, allegedly, are taken away like weekly. Okay.
Every hour there's a check. So once per hour, it might get taken away.
Okay.
You're good for an hour.
Now, let me just say, it sounds like a lot of work to maintain Spot VMs, but this is the magic of auto-scaling VM scale sets. So you say, I demand 5 VMs total, and they're all Spot. Be very careful with this. I demand 5 VMs total. They're all Spot. And it says, okay, here's 5. And then it takes away 3 of them, and it takes away 2 of them. But the moment it takes any of them away, our autoscaler says, I want new ones. Now we are relying on it. Spot works. It is, how do I say this, Adam? It feels like an economic coincidence that it works, but it works. We have not had problems with availability for Spot VMs. You know where we've had problems with availability? GPUs on Spot. Turns out there's this thing called a GPU VM that tend to be in high demand, and Azure has refused to give us some spots, and it made me sad. I'll be honest, Adam.
Fewer of those. What you didn't say what spot are, what instances are.
They are massively discounted VMs that Azure can take away at any moment, and Azure can refuse to give to you.
Spare capacity.
Spare capacity. He has the better explanation for the record.
Spare capacity.
It is spare capacity. That is why they're cheap, and sometimes they're 90% discount. And I don't know if y'all know, but people notice when there's a 90% discount on your servers, and it runs just as fast. And, you know, it might get interrupted once an hour or once a week, Adam. Might get interrupted once an hour or once a week for a few minutes, and then it's back, and you're paying 90% discount again. It's really nice. Again, our costs significantly dropped. Like it went from like our background compute being like a giant chunk of our cost to being like just one of many equal size costs. Like, for example, Cosmos. We got work to do working on our Cosmos, but Cosmos costs us a lot of money still. Faster auto scaling. So cloud services, what's up? Yep.
Yes, possible.
Cluster.
Yep. Okay, sorry. That is a very good question. I've not connected the lines. We're going to connect to the dots. I don't know. AKS is Azure's managed Kubernetes service. They let you run via a VM scale set, which will appear in your AKS cluster. You don't know that it's running a VM on the background. You just know that there is a Kubernetes node that appears. A Kubernetes node, you know, might have 32 cores and this much RAM, 100 gigabytes of RAM, whatever. So if you say, I want an AKS node pool and I want it to be Spot VMs, these nodes will appear in your AKS cluster saying, I'm willing to serve up 16 cores worth of work, and I have 64 gigabytes of RAM. I don't know if I'm explaining it well.
There's still using the just like
Okay, let me explain. So I'm not explaining well, Adam. It's what happens. It's a good discussion, though. We're learning. Okay, so AKS is a hybrid model. You run a VM scale set and you choose the base image, which, by the way, they keep improving the base image, Adam. I'm very happy with that. They're very secure base images. You were talking about OpenShift being secure. I don't care. Azure's base image is very secure. Very happy with it. I don't think we've chosen that, but yeah.
Better. Take a look at that one.
I did, and I was excited. So anyway, so you are under the hood running what is called a VM scale set. It is one or many VMs or zero or many VMs under the hood. Yes, you can connect to them. Don't do it. It is a shared responsibility model, but you don't see them. For the most part, they're running right now in production, I promise. I do not have to know anything about these VMs except the number of them. They are truly cattle. You've heard the cattle versus pets. They are truly cattle at this point. And some of them are Spot.
Azure like.
Answer it.
Like that. So
yes, please.
There's at least 3 different services. As a platform as a service, it's fully automated, even though it's actually virtual machines. They're fully automated virtual machines. You don't have to stand them up. No pull, bunch of VMs appear, and then they can be cheap. So that's AKS, most complicated, and then you put your containers on that thing. Service, and that one, you cannot see the VMs at all. There's no node pools or anything like that. It's much simpler, smaller, has less features, but still drop your containers on that. So that's easier to manage. There's less to deal with, less features as well. And then there's container instances, which are in individual container, and there's no other. Basically a container all by itself with even less extra stuff around. Also Kubernetes, but yeah, it gets progressively simpler as you go down those three services. Which you pick depends on how much complexity you want in your life, features that you need, if that answers your question. So only AKS virtual machines that you can really see that they're in, and you pay for them. So that's the cost. You pay for those virtual machines. The others are the exact same containers, all run on all.
So
it is all automatic. You set up a VM scale set, you say, in fact, we even scale on the spot scale set because we don't know how much load background jobs we're going to be running, and we're okay with a little bit of slowness scaling the VMs. So how do I say this? So we'll say I need a minimum of 1 and a maximum of 30 nodes. It'll spin up 1. Then Kubernetes will request an additional auto scale, and it'll spin up a second one. And then if Azure takes 1 away, then it automatically knows that I need to get back to 2. I'm not doing a great job. Just try it out. It's real easy. Yeah. Okay. Okay, I didn't even get to the auto scaling. Okay, auto scaling, cloud services, again, it works. It had actually pretty nice metrics about network metrics. So it can scale on CPU. Anyway, whatever. The point is cloud services scaling was great, but it was so slow. And the way we had it configured, we could have improved it, but we chose to just leave it as is and move to Kubernetes. How about that? So we had a much better auto scaling, but honestly, we probably could have tweaked our cloud services scaling and just gotten all the benefits there. Let's be honest. Don't worry, this isn't being recorded, so no one will know. Okay, faster deployments. This is something people list as like a major thing. It honestly isn't that big of a deal for me. Like compared to major cost savings, this is like kind of a nice to have. But I mean, people list it as a major thing. But for me, it's faster, more reliable deployments, great. But did y'all see the bottom line change? Okay. Okay. We deploy during the day. we don't want to deal with it at night. So yeah, we're deploying during the day. For our flagship. For the other stuff, who knows when it's going out. All right, more improvements. I'm going to introduce new terms, Prometheus and Alert Manager. It's a really nice open source platform. It can be run anywhere. We happen to run it in Kubernetes. It's got a lot of nice stuff. And they're it's a big community of people. We've got it hooked up. It improved our monitoring drastically just by setting up the basics. It's nice. Vulnerable. Now we predated it. So I would love, because we've had Prometheus problems, I would love to move, but we'll get to it. You know, we did some stuff that affected the bottom line. Moving to Azure Prometheus, it's nice, but maybe one day. Maybe one day. It'll never happen. Vulnerability scanning. Containers are actually quite good at if you actually want to improve your security. You actually want to improve. That's an if. You should look into getting into containers so that you can run a scanner. They will find everything. And by the way, no matter, I don't think it's always .NET because there have been so many OpenSSL vulnerabilities, just everything gets patched. Once OpenSSL gets vulnerable, We're just patching everything. But we find it due to Azure Defender for Cloud, I think, scans, and it's really good at catching everything. Okay. Okay, the last thing is after we got confidence with our scaling, which took many months, and we figured out what we were doing, we introduced scale to zero. Scale to zero is where you say, I have this message queue consumer. It just sits there and listens to RabbitMQ all day. And it literally gets one password reset email a week. And then you say, this is an example. This isn't the real example. What really happens is we had a bunch of data uploaded. There are now 10,000 messages in the queue. But what will usually happen is all these things sit idle. So what we did was once we actually figured out what we were doing, we introduced scale to zero. And we have metrics now that run as part of a very complicated Kubernetes thing. Don't ask. Don't ask how it works. It's Kata. But it lets us scale to zero, which means instead of running hundreds of things, we're running 2, which happen to have messages in the queue at this moment. And it's really beautiful as long as it works. Don't let it break though, because anyway. All right.
Mostly works for you, but doesn't.
It works great as long as I'll talk about it during the outages section. So we've had to bootstrap all our Kubernetes knowledge. Kubernetes has a yearly deprecation cycle. Kubernetes has a yearly deprecation cycle. Some of y'all are still running .NET Framework apps. Just imagine falling out of support within the first year, and then also within the second year, also within the third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth year. I recommend Azure Container Apps. It is the end of the year 2023 because it gives me all the benefits I care about in AKS, but it does not have a yearly deprecation cycle, I hope. So just keep that in mind. I am working for a small team. We're at a certain scale. We're pretty big. We go well over 1,000 cores, but we are not at the 10,000 cores, So the yearly deprecation cycle, we don't have a giant team to go update our YAML. Update our YAML. For me, I just don't want to deal with it. You know what doesn't have a yearly deprecation cycle? Every other service you use does not have a yearly deprecation cycle, but Kubernetes does. So there you go. Good times. Early mistakes haunt us still. Oh, what did I? Okay, great. No. Deprecations mean, let's say, for example, there was old YAML in your code, which was the freshest YAML at the time. And I call it YAML. It's your resource data, and it is represented in YAML. Your resource, you define it in YAML. 2 years ago, it was perfect. It was the newest thing. And then this year, you were told that the runtime profile annotation is no longer supported. Now, that doesn't sound like such a bad thing, except the moment you try and deploy, it will fail your deployment and say, sorry, this is deprecated, even though we know exactly what this was. All right, all right, we're moving on. Yearly deprecation cycle may not affect you. When it does, you'll be very angry. You still won't go to Service Fabric, but you'll be very angry. Early mistake haunt us still. Adam, thank you for the tip about persistent volumes. Do zone redundant storage for things like Prometheus, for example, that have a storage and is not a stateless service.
Stateless services.
Or as much as you can. Prometheus isn't though. What are you going to do? Not use it, or you start with Azure Prometheus. Okay, thread starvation is suddenly a problem. This is a global thing. This was something we encountered. This is not a .NET issue. So I'm going to be very careful. When you're running in a container, you are not running in a virtual machine. Your container might report that it has hundreds of cores available to it. When your program spins up and says, I have hundreds of cores available to me, it's going to try and use all. That's if, depending on how your program is created, it might report that it has hundreds of cores, especially if you're running, for example, in Azure. And this is a per hosting situation. So we run in AKS. It definitely happened with us in AKS, but it will probably happen elsewhere too, depending on your isolation level. So if your program thinks it has hundreds of cores and it spins up hundreds of threads, and then your Kubernetes cluster says you are limited to 1/5 of a core, you're going to get a lot of confusing logs that say timeout, or just nothing, because your thing will be just working and doing them. So I'm saying this very carefully. This is to help you out. Thread starvation may suddenly be a problem. Just be aware of it. There is a very well documented model for how these containers work. It's called the completely fair scheduler, and it is completely fair. And I spent an entire afternoon reading about it. And that was my summary of an entire afternoon of reading about the completely fair scheduler. Okay, so here's a lot of new nouns. We're running in AKS. I will just say, if you're running elsewhere, Azure Container Apps runs Kata for you. So if it doesn't work, that's their fault. Prometheus. Is that what Kata? Okay. Thank you. The autoscaler. Kata, the autoscaler. Anyway, these are a bunch of nouns. So the fun thing with Kata is there's a setting, when we upgraded it, there's a setting they introduced called keep connections open. And it was set to true. I don't know why it was set to true, but in summary, on our small clusters, it did fine because it was opening connections, keeping them open, and it never exhausted all. On our large cluster, it would run out of connections and exhaust them and fail for about an hour, and then it would kick back on. So did I mention we didn't do scale to zero until after we figured that one out? Because if you scale to zero and your autoscaler doesn't work, you have a critical outage. Don't run websites on autoscalers either, by the way. It's a whole different discussion. The Super Bowl problem, we can have a whole session on the Super Bowl ad problem. What happens when you have an ad in the Super Bowl and you need to scale up, but you don't want to have a person on call to have to scale it up ahead of time? Well, how do you automatically scale up for the Super Bowl? I don't know, Adam. I don't think there's an answer.
Predictably ramp it way up.
Okay. There you go. So we've already solved that problem. That was bonus. That was for free. I spent more time on Cert Manager last week. It's a great product. I'm tired. I just want certificates. Kubernetes API server. So this was a fun story. So during a stand-up, we don't have daily stand-ups anymore. We're efficient. But when we had a daily stand-up, I said, you know what? I'm going to upgrade my Kubernetes. I'm going to drain out 10 nodes. I think I did 20 nodes. 20 of our spot VM nodes running background jobs. They don't matter. They just need to finish eventually. So I said, I'll drain out 20 of these at once. And you know what falls over? Something I didn't know existed. It's called the Kubernetes API server. It's great. Don't do that. We had, was it an actual outage? Let's just say nothing moved for about 30 minutes. So we drained out a bunch of stuff and it all stayed exactly where it was for about 30 minutes. And then the API server caught up and it fixed itself. It was terrifying. Our website stayed up. Don't touch nothing. It wasn't an outage. Okay, Linkerd, it's a great product. Why are there 200 pending pods? Things are a little bit scary sometimes. Why has Calico restarted 300 times? These are just fun little stories for y'all. Fun little stories. Anyway, but it's not all beneficial. I will re-emphasize to simplicity when possible. Okay, ongoing tweaks. We improve our monitoring. We can add our own alert manager alerts. Anyway, always improving monitoring basically after an outage. But hopefully we're having some quiet time. We might get to some of it this month. assuming nothing else blows up. Container CPU RAM right sizing, basically saying you can, what's it called? You can Kubernetes, it's great. You could say, I want this much RAM and this much CPU. And if you want, ask for more RAM, it's out of memory exception. A little scary, but it works great. You can do that for pretty much any hosting of containers. You just specify CPU and RAM and pay for it, by the way. It's not, you pay for it. It's fine. Auto scaling, we're improving our auto scaling. Okay. So this comes back to why containers. My number one reason for containers, besides the small lease thing, is that it is a large ecosystem with a bright future. Microsoft is just one of many companies invested in making containers work. There are many hosting platforms that will host containers. There are many easy ways to host containers locally. Future, I mentioned ARM here. It is currently, in the current year, if you just compare core to core, ARM is 20 to 30% cheaper. Now, does it run the same speed? Does it run my stuff the same speed? I don't know because I haven't bothered to try, but I could try at some point. Does my code work on ARM? I don't know either, but whatever. Once our compute costs keeps sizing up, we'll look at it. And our reservations. We got reservations. You can't just move stuff. That's why they want you to reserve stuff, but it is a significant discount. Oh, an Azure reservation, you pay in advance for either 1 year or a 3 year. Let's call it a lease. But it is it's easier to break than an apartment lease. I'll tell you that. So 1 or 3 year lease on a specific number of cores and SKU. Oh yeah, SKU of a certain family in a certain region, and you can get a 30% discount, basically.
Just got there.
You get a discount. So there you go. Leverage savings of ARM. And then you can do, once you're sure you're going to run stuff in ARM, you can get your lease on the ARM. Okay, ratcheting up security. I did make a note that says .NET 8. I watched the recent conference presentation that they showed all their improvements. I'm very happy. They did a lot of things. If you build a container with .NET SDK, they made a lot of improvements. And they did it for you, and you don't have to think about it. So this is a .NET specific thing, but you can do all these things in any language. Like one of our vendors switched to a Rocky Linux base image. Why not? There's a whole vendor, again, it's talking about a huge ecosystem called ChainGuard. Raspberry Pis, yeah, locally, yeah. I have a Raspberry Pi. It's called my old desktop. It's a very powerful Raspberry Pi. I just set it on the floor. It's about this big, and plug in a network cable, and it's a very powerful Raspberry Pi.
I have an actual Raspberry Pi, and it does run containers. Yeah, containers. Yeah.
Either way, whatever. So anyway, ChainGuard is a vendor that will sell you secure support for secure containers. And depending on your security profile, you may want to pay for that. That's a great benefit of an big open ecosystem with vendor support. Okay. I did mention that. Don't sweep it under the rug. That's what the one thing is. Okay, don't contain vulnerability scanners are pretty bad about scanning statically compiled images or statically compiled binaries, so don't do it. All right. In retrospect, worth it. We are having a great time. Kubernetes mostly works. I did go over the negatives. Okay.
Kubernetes.
2020, there were fewer. I will recommend Azure Container Apps. You know what? Let me go to my, oh, by the way, you don't have to say anything, Adam. Don't say anything. It is my talk. I highly recommend, don't consider Windows containers. If you got Windows stuff you got to run an app service. So app services run on Windows. I highly recommend them. We still run stuff in there. It works great. I don't recommend containers. Maybe they get better over time. If they're completely separate. they should spell it different. They should spell Windows containers differently to let us know that they are completely different things. Oh, well, that is the Windows container slide. Don't, Peter says, don't bother. Yeah, and they are improving Windows containers. And whenever someone's talking about containers, they're talking about the Linux ones, mostly. There you go, mostly. So if you have I still recommend Azure App Service if you have stuff that needs to run on Windows. Anyway, okay, I'm pretty much done. SDK container tooling is good. Avoid Kubernetes unless you need it. And migrating to .NET Core is the bulk of the work, assuming you're in .NET. And at the time, we could have made Service Fabric work. We could have been a happy Service Fabric customer. We could have turned that smile upside down. We did not need Kubernetes. I think it is a good choice. It has a massive ecosystem, which I think brings every benefit along with it.
AKS goes up to 1,000 nodes,
yeah.
Whereas container apps is much, much smaller than that. It may be your workloads wouldn't fit on container apps. It's relatively teeny weeny.
We'd make a lot of them.
There's 3 different hosting services for containers in Azure. AKS, big one. Virtual machines, container app. Simpler, there's no Kubernetes, but it is much smaller. So the number of containers you can fit on one of those, way. So great for smaller applications where you want simplicity. Where big, like Peter's, might not fit container apps, might not be big enough for you.
How about a lot of them? How about a few hundred?
Could work too, but again, there's limits on how many environments you can have on a region. So you may hit limits.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm trying to be vague, but let me just say the big circle that has a times 100, this is our flagship SaaS product. Each one of these big circles is running a few websites. It's running well over a dozen background services, some of which are scaling to 0, some of which, for example, reset password requests, you actually don't want to scale on that. You want that one to go out. Maybe that's why every website I use, when I click the reset password, it doesn't actually email me for about 10 minutes. It's because maybe they're auto scaling. Don't auto scale your emails. They're not that expensive. Just run them all the time. Okay. But we are like this single circle represents our monolithic code base, which is deployed. It's a multi-headed Hydra. It is a monolithic multi-headed Hydra. It presents itself to the world with many heads. I will also say, by the way, I have a 7-hour microservices talk and you just kicked it off. So we're going to be here 7 hours talking about microservices. Can't wait. But there is a reason I did a single circle. It's because microservices terms, it is a massive monolithic service.
Got a couple of questions for you.
Yeah.
One directly relevant to AKS.
I'm sorry, what?
One directly relevant to AKS. You didn't talk about DR with AKS. Have you tried that?
Disaster recovery?
Yeah. The scale to 0 concept, does it have it in any relevance doing a hot cold AKS region to region DR?
We deploy, that would be it's very easy to deploy. We're not doing the config backup and config restore in AKS. Does that make sense? We are also multi-zone. So if there is a zone outage, we are safe. A single zone. If there's a whole regional outage, maybe we should talk to Adam. But there are two
We're
general ways.
interested in figuring that out on our journey. Should we, because we don't want to spend too much and run an active configuration.
Yeah.
If we do end up running an active passive or hot cold, how long does it take to scale and deploy everything on the code?
From my
In
experience,
relation to it, as well as data. Not talked about data in that.
okay, so data, let's be very clear, I recommend.
Databases.
Okay, so this is where I started with don't run stateful services. An example of a stateful service is a database.
No, I'm not talking about running AKS containers with the database outside even though, but you still need a different region to bring your database up.
Every Azure thing lets you choose whether to make it zone redundant. And I am honestly, Adam, can you answer, if there is a zone outage, will the database that is zone redundant be accessible? My answer is yes. My assumption is yes.
Yeah, if you've enabled zone redundancy on your database, then that puts different replicas, different zones. So yep, it'll stay up.
My query is regional,
Right.
not zone.
Cross region.
Yes.
So you'll need to set up your database to be cross-region as well as zonal. So you can do that. And then for your AKS clusters, they're regional only, right? So you'll need one in each region. And then you'll need to manage deployments between those two AKS clusters and have them deployed. So you can use there's a new container, I'm blanking, Kubernetes management service, an orchestrated service. I've forgotten the name of, that can deploy to multiple clusters, the same application to help with that. But they're independent. You need two separate clusters. That's different from the databases where it will do that work for you. Redis cache will do that work for you. API management will do that work for you. AKS does not do that work for you. So you have some extra.
My request is basically in the other region, whatever it happens to be our secondary region, keeping everything cold, not scaled, but then come back if there is DR. How long does it take to stand up all the services on demand? That's actually what I was trying to reference.
Okay. Not active.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, let me say.
You don't have a need for it.
I have seen.
It's expensive.
Yeah.
I've done some work scaling up AKS node pools, and you can say I demand a minimum of 15 nodes. And assuming you don't have allocation failures, which got to work at, test your DR, I guess. But assuming you don't have allocation failures, it takes a few minutes to get all of them, maybe 5. And so as long as, but like if you want to be just ready, I don't know how long it's going to take you. 4 months.
Give it a try.
4 months or less.
Yeah, but in your use case, right, you can stand that cluster up and then just shut it off, right? And it will just deprovision all of the node pools and there you go. So it's the amount of time that those VMs need to boot. 4 or 5 minutes, they'll boot in parallel, assuming there is capacity in the region, the time that you need it. And that's a risk that you take by doing the cold, right? You make an assumption that you'll be able to spin up those VMs when you click the start button. You make that assumption. You should be able to. You take a risk that you won't. Factor that into the cost management.
My second question for you, something that you said like very at the beginning of your talk about RabbitMQ.
Yeah.
So could you, since you're using the services, could you compare and contrast, because we want to do this? We have picked up Azure Service Bus.
Yeah.
So Azure Service Bus versus RabbitMQ running on Azure. Which one is better according to you in your experience if you have contrasted them?
I like not running services myself. So if that is your primary goal, then I recommend Service Bus. They are almost identical.
So one confusion that I have about service buses, I don't know if this is true or my misunderstanding. If you want to run the Azure Service Bus, their endpoint is public. So if you have data that is PII, you need a private endpoint. They charge you, I think, $700 per instance. I don't know how correct I am, but
There is something about private networks I cannot remember. But if you need the SKU, you need the SKU. But I think Yeah, you might be right. I don't know. That would be a major cost. I will say running a Rabbit server is at least, I mean, if you want redundancy, if you want a cluster of 3 of them, you're going to run 2 core servers 3 times. So we evaluated Rabbit to Azure Service Bus. Basically, we're too lazy.
Here's an answer. You've got to file your process. Protect your instance.
But he's saying he needs to pay for a higher SKU to get the private network.
You can set up a proxy server. You can contract party service. All fair. Takes the data between the endpoint and the server.
We'll see. It depends on if the SKU requires
In
premium.
the reading I had done, I have somehow made this assumption that Azure has on purpose made it very difficult for you to do those things because they want that cost from you. If you want to keep your data protected on Azure Service Bus, to be specific. I believe every project sometimes could be to Kubernetes and Azure. It's better your own server. You need to understand how to protect your own server or how Azure protect the server. The server.
I'll just tell you, cross-region disaster recovery with RabbitMQ doesn't sound.
No, I'm not. We're mingling the 2 concepts. Two separate questions.
Two separate things, because.
Along this,
Okay. Well,
you haven't gotten there yet.
oh, goodness. Well, anyway, I recommend Service
Maybe in a
Bus.
few months.
Service Bus. It also has a, what do they call it? Rabbit compatibility mode, AMQP
Yes.
compatibility in theory, which I've never used, but I've been told it's great and it's compatible with Rabbit. So you can run Rabbit locally for development and then deploy to Azure Service Bus Cloud and hope that nothing goes wrong.
I'll let you know in a few months. I'll let you know in a few months.
Okay, excellent.
Thanks.
Yeah. Are you asking about where the data goes? This is one reason why I keep recommending stateless services. There is an answer. It is not that bad. It is called a persistent volume or a volume. For Docker containers, if you're running locally, just pay close attention to where it says volumes and volume mounts. And I think it's semi-magical. Can a container declare where its persistent data is? I feel like it's semi-magical. Because I've started up some services that, from vendors like SQL Server, Rabbit, and it seems like it makes a volume mount. Otherwise, you're defining it. Oh, good. They are on the host file system. And now if you're hosting an Azure service, AKS, there's a lot of layers of indirection, but eventually you get to a Azure disk, which is either locally redundant, zonally redundant, geo-redundant. So in that case, those are very different things, but Kubernetes has 18 layers of abstraction always. Too many, but someone needed it. Not me, but someone. Anyway, the other services also have ways to mount a disk or maybe Azure storage. I think, yeah, Kubernetes, we also make use for some of our lighter stuff. We just mount a Azure storage file share. Is it called file share?
File share, yep, a feature of Azure Storage.
Feature of Azure Storage, and it mounts it as a part of the file system. And it works. It can, yeah. Yes, and again, it's very hard to move. If you're starting out with containers and you're running in the cloud, I do not recommend running all this stuff in containers because it's hard to move. And it's a little bit harder. It's stateful specifically. RabbitMQ is a perfect example of a stateful service. The state is that persistent mount, and even the configuration of the cluster. Anyway, yeah, don't forget if there you have a cluster in it. Anyway, you don't want to lose that. Let's just put it that way. A lot of clustering services use certificate authentication, which is great and secure, and you just never want to lose it. Just want to throw that out there. That's a fun fact. Never want to lose it. You don't want to lose it. Yeah, see, he knows. He knows. All right, I am definitely done. It is definitely time. Do y'all have other questions? This has been great. I've been happy with our discussion. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you to the rest of y'all.
Any more questions? Otherwise, we'll close it out. Last chance. All right. Well, thank you, Peter. Really appreciate that. You learned something? Anyone learn something? Yeah. Yeah. Always good to, I think one of my favorite types of the talk is when it's a member of the community just sharing their actual experience. Not all of it necessarily good, as we found out, because that's how we learn, right? Learn from others' bad experiences. And that's good. We like hearing that. So really appreciate that. We're going to actually have another talk like similar next month. So we have an architect coming from Lyondell to describe their journey from BizTalk. Anyone heard of BizTalk? Know what that is? Yeah, ancient. So they had BizTalk and they migrated to off of that thing because it got deprecated. Yeah, like every 5 minutes, deprecated. And so they moved all to Azure and a whole bunch of a service called Logic Apps, lots of those. So that's next month. So January 2nd Tuesday of every month, we're targeting now. So hope to see you all back here for that. And thanks everyone for coming out. Really great to see you all. Hope to see you next month. Thank you.